Hi, this is Miss Linton, and this is Friday afternoon super fun review. Say hi.
Aloha.
Hi. We are so excited to be here. So this is two-chapter review, chapter 23 and chapter 24. So the first part was about the evolution of plants. So we just kind of want to remember that our ancestral algae that could have given rise to land plants is, say my name. Chara. Okay? So this is a green algae, and maybe all land plants were derived from this particular algae. We talked about the characteristics that well, actually, let me take it back. Let's talk about the plants are important because we need them for food and oxygen, shade. We talked about moving on to land. Why would a plant even make that step? And one of the things is, if you have an unexploited environment, if you move on to land, then you have more resources are available to you. You don't have any predators because there wasn't any plants on land before. So you had more direct access to the sunlight. It wasn't filtered out by the water. But the disadvantage is you didn't need to have any kind of backbone, right? You didn't need to have any kind of support in order to get up on land. Or you need support to get up on land, and they didn't have that. So that was one of the early evolutionary steps that needed to be made. Also, you don't have access to water. So you have to develop structures that can acquire water. So when we look at that evolutionary pathway, your ancestral plant here would be who? Chara. Okay? So that's your ancestral plant. Then the moss, what did they have? It's at a node, but what did they? Roots. Oh, yeah, they had roots, okay? So from here on up, the algae wouldn't, but from here on up, they have roots. But then we drop the mosses out because the rest up have what? Vascular. Yeah, and those are true land plants when you have that vascular tissue, okay? And ferns are great, but what are they missing? Seeds. That's why they're called seedless vascular plants. From here on up, you have seeds. Conifers are like gymnosperms, right? So they do have a seed, but it's a naked seed. It's not protected by any diploid tissue, but you do have that with flowering plants. And remember, our flowering plants, we break into two groups. What are they? Eudicots? Eudicot. And what? Monocot. Perfect. All right. That's all good, good. And so we looked at a few other cladograms after that. Here's a good slide because it kind of shows you that evolutionary change over time. We looked at our poster child plants that went through that. And then we reviewed alternation of generations. Now, in the most basic part of alternation of generations, you have the on land, the evolutionarily advanced plants. The sporophyte, the diploid, is the large structural plant. And the gametophyte is greatly reduced and lives within the sporophyte. Okay, but if we start out early, when we look at moss, that's an exception to the rule. That is, the gametophyte is the big green leafy part, and the sporophyte is dependent upon it. So that is an exception. Here with the fern, this is not this big. Obviously, this is microscopic. Not it. Ping pong back and forth and say what you know about this slide or take on this slide. Pick or choose which one you want to do.
I'm doing this one. Okay. So I see the individual is diploid, and that's called and then we sporophytes, and then that is hotwood cells. And then
So it undergoes meiosis breakdown.
Yeah, so the sporophyte, the spores make sporophytes.
So, okay, sporophytes always make spores. Gametophytes always make gametes. You gotta remember that. Say it again. Sporophytes always make spores. Gametophytes always make gametes. Now, of those four words, sporophytes always make spores, gametophytes always make gametes, only one of those is diploid. What is? What? Sporophyte is diploid. Okay, let's review again. All right, so let's look right here. Okay, sporophyte's the only thing that's diploid. Sporophyte always makes spores by meiosis. Then that spore grows up by mitosis to the gametophyte, always makes gametes. The only thing that's diploid, choice. The only thing that is diploid is the sporophyte. Sporophyte always makes spores, gametophytes always make gametes. So the sporophyte is the only diploid tissue. Okay? Put that in your own words, whoever's turn it is. Go. Explain it.
So diploid both are full-time chromosomes. So the only one that has that is the sporophyte, which is how you see the spore, really. Right?
Okay? So, keeping that in mind, here is your diploid individual. It's a fern. What is that then? It's the sporophyte. And on its underside, in its sporangia, it's going to do meiosis and make spores, which are haploid. Those spores grow up to this very small heart-shaped structure, which is the gametophyte, which generates gametes, which get together through the process of fertilization to form a diploid zygote. The zygote's going to be diploid, right? And the zygote grows up into the sporophyte, which is diploid, but everything else is haploid. Okay? But the dominant structure, as you look at the trends on land, the dominant structure that you see is the sporophyte generation. Good? Do you want me to ask you those questions on it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's log, okay, I want to continue. Let's log in as our favorite blue thing. Because you're all blue. I'm pausing.
Answer.
Okay. Here we go. Let's see how we did. Yay!
Oh, there's a lot of people in here.
Oh. Gametophytes always form gametes, right? Sporophytes always make spores. Gametophytes always make gametes. What's the only diploid thing in that little limerick? Sporophyte. Okay? Yes. All right. Now, she showed me the blue man group. Do I need to start? Am I recording? I hope I'm recording. Am I recording?
Yes.
I am. Okay. Now, we moved on to chapter 24, specifically looking at flowering plants and their structures. And so once again, let's visit a cladogram. And you can see from here on up, protecting the embryo. Green algae did not do that. Okay, from here on up, non-vascular plants, like your moss. This would be like your ferns, gymnosperms, and we're focused now on angiosperms, flowering plants, with monocots and eudicots, and here are their plant tissues. First of all starters. The male gamete fertilizes the female gamete, and it forms a diploid what? Zygote. That tissue, that early tissue is called meristematic tissue. That meristematic tissue will develop into some basic tissues, the primary meristems, protoderm, which you'll develop all your dermal tissues, ground tissue, remember parenchyma, parenchyma, sclerenchyma, which here is alive?
The first two.
The first two, parenchyma and parenchyma. Sclerenchyma is dead. That's like walnut seed shells, things that are really hard like that. And then procambium will develop into xylem and phloem. If you are a monocot, that's where the story ends, with your xylem and phloem that's laid down by your apical meristems. But if you are a eudicot, you have vascular cambium, which can develop more xylem and more phloem. Okay, and that allows for branching. And we'll review that in just a minute. Looking at dermal tissues, we have things like root hairs. What's that right there? Stomata. You're going to be counting those up on your leaves, right? Okay, and then this is a lenticel to allow for gas exchange, like in the bark of a tree. Here we have Trichomes, which could be toxic to somebody. Those are all derivatives of epidermal tissue. Your ground tissue, you have 3 basic categories. Which one is the one you see most frequently? Parenchyma. Say it. Parenchyma. Parenchyma is prolific. Prolific parenchyma. Prolific parenchyma. Okay, it's all over the place. And when you have, you could have parenchyma in your roots that store starch. You could have parenchyma that's spongy mesophyll that does photosynthesis in your leaves. It is alive and it is your typical plant. Parenchyma is something you would see like in celery. It's crunchy parenchyma. It is still alive. You could call the parenchyma. It does have irregularly thickened walls to allow for support on edges of leaves. Sclerenchyma, the red is the cell wall. So it is so thick, there's no oxygen or CO2 that's going to go across that wall to get to the cell to keep it alive. All right? So here's parenchyma, parenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Here, a review of xylem, which is what we're getting ready to study in this next chapter. You have tracheids, thin, narrow, long, and vessels, which are more like pipes. Look like this. And we have phloem. And phloem, what's different about phloem from xylem? Yes?
It goes to the roots instead of
It can go, yeah, it can go both ways. It can go down and store in the roots, and it can reverse and flow the other direction. So this has a reverse and flow. What else is different? Yes.
Carries, well, they carry different things. So.
Yeah, so what does phloem primarily carry? Nutrients, sugar. Now, there's water in phloem too, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work. But it primarily carries sugars, whereas xylem is transporting water. Okay? Some more differences. Yes?
I have a question. Does xylem only flow up opposed to
Yeah.
flowing up? Okay.
Only flows up. What else? It's another difference. Yes?
Xylem is dead.
Yes. Xylem functions while dead, but phloem needs to be alive to function. Because xylem, if it's just an open tube, you can still transpire out that open tube because that's the properties of water enable that to happen. Adhesion, cohesion, it evaporates out transpiration and follows the water potential gradient, which is tension. Okay, what's another difference? Yes?
Phloem has the companion.
Exactly. Xylem stands alone with other xylem, but phloem, while alive, has a companion cell that controls it. The phloem cell itself does not have a nucleus. Okay? So there are distinct differences between xylem and phloem, and I would be comfortable with those. Next, we talked about just kind of the parts of a plant. You just want to be familiar with that. Is that a monocot or a eudicot? How do you know it's a eudicot? Yeah, you can see the leaves. What else? The leaves have the pinnate venation in it. What else?
The axillary. Oh, the petiole.
The petioles attaching it. That's good. There's branching, you know, a little bit, right? Maybe. Okay. We look here. We can see roots. Leaves. Is that a monocot or a eudicot? Eudicot. Good. So there are some of these that, you know, to help you that are embedded in the notes. You have charts that differentiate between monocots and eudicots. I'd be comfortable to recognize and identify it by primarily seed leaves. So is it solid or does it have 2 seed leaves like a bean has 2 halves? Knowing how they look characteristically, the vascular tissue in the roots and the stem. Scattered vascular bundles in a monocot, very organized vascular bundles around vascular cambium, xylem to the inside, phloem to the outside. The leaf patterns, easy way to differentiate. Anything other than parallel, can be pinnate, palmate venation, anything other than parallel is going to be a eudicot. And then flower parts. If you're in flower parts of 3s, then you're going to be a monocot. 4s and 5s, you're going to be a eudicot. Obviously, 12 causes a problem. So you'll have to look at other things. All right. Next, oh, here you go. will pause you. Okay, so we struggled a little bit on this one. Which of these is an incorrect contrast between monocots stated first and eudicots stated second? Monocots do have one cotyledon and eudicots have two. Nobody picked that. Leaf veins parallel, is that true in monocots? Yes. Any kind of net would be in eudicots. So that's a true. One of you picked that. You were right. All of you picked C. Vascular bundles in rings, vascular bundles scattered. Who has scattered vascular bundles? Monocots. And it's in their what? Root or stem? Stem. Mm-hmm. Stem. And vascular bundles are in rings in the stem of a eudicot. Nobody picked D. Oh man. Okay. So maybe review that a little bit. All right. And then, wait, do I have another set of questions? Oh, here. Annual plants. Annual sounds like, yeah, it seems like annual, one. One growing season. Bi, that sounds like two. Perennial, several. Okay. All right, and then here is another set of questions.
I love
Pause you.
I don't know if she's making a second guess herself. We're probably wrong. Oh, we might not be.
Non-living would be sclerenchyma. Meristematic. Only one of you got that. Whoever you are, superstar.
Who was it?
Who was the superstar? Nice, Isaac. Okay, so remember meristematic stem cells? Those are the ones that are going to divide, like primary meristem. Okay. All right. Next, we talked a little bit about signaling, as an example of signaling in order to integrate a flower. What I want you to see here is about the leaves are actually controlling when the flowering is, because the leaves are knowing what the season is. Why is that? Because when you have the right season, then you're going to get a transcription factor. And once you have the transcription factor, then you have something to help RNA, what? Polymerase bind to the promoter. You make your mRNA. This is what kind of RNA again? mRNA is, and it acts like a true messenger. It actually moves up through the phloem and to the area of the plant that's going to generate the flower. So it is a genetic code, but it's also acting like a true messenger, a chemical messenger to another part of the plant, where you translate that message into a protein, which hooks together with another transcription factor, which ultimately gets the gene expressed so that you get flowering. So it's just one simple example of how the leaves can determine a flower forming in another part of the plant. Could I please have the youngest bio buddy? I yow this right here. Go, young one.
Plants, the leaves, they start on the light. Essentially, they start on the night in order to get their ranges retractors to tell the rest of their cells to start flowering.
All right, and I am moving on from there. Okay, so now let's talk about just some focus in on root tissues. And we talked about the regions of the root, zone of cell division, so you're making a bunch of cells. Zone of elongation, they're just getting bigger. And then zone of maturation, you're developing the root hairs, exactly. And then we can even see in this root, what kind of root is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a Eudicot root. And look, you know about this. What's it showing in this picture? Non-transpiration. Apoplast and the symplast, and the way water moves through the plant. Can you not see it? Are you too far away, Isaac? Okay. It's like, I can't. I have Superman eyes. I can see it from anywhere. Remember this? Whoa. So here it's going through the symplast, and here it's going around through the apoplast until it gets to the endodermal cells, and at that point, you've got to go through a living cell, right? And maybe we can do a proton pump, and then bring the water in like we learned today. Yeah. All right. Hey, look at these. Xylem, phloem, pith, Eudicot, parts of a plant. All right, perfect. Let's look at some root adaptations. What is their job? Anchor the plant, right? So it doesn't fall over. When you look at a tree, pick any tree out here. Whatever you see above ground, there's an equal amount of roots below ground. Okay, think about that. All right? So whatever you see out here, you're also going to see that underground in the roots. It's anchoring. What else is it doing? Absorbing. What kind of things is it absorbing? Nutrients, like water would be really important. Okay.
It's separate. It's like separate.
Still important, slightly. And then also it can store. It can store nutrients that the plants make for when it's cold and in the winter, because winter is coming, and then the phloem can bring those nutrients back up. So here we can see a taproot versus a fibrous root. Here's some other root adaptations. Buttress, storage root, strangling roots. Okay. All right. Here is a root adaptation, which you know all about. Myco, bad moon, rising, right? So it's a mutualistic relationship. It's a song. I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. She let her genie out and it ran away. Fifth period, you know. What happens is the fungi increase what? Surface area for absorption of water. Roots absorb water. And then the plant pays the fungi with what? Okay. Sure, sugar. Remember the nitrogen fixing bacteria?
Yeah.
Say my name, say my name. Cyanobacteria. I live in the nodules.
Whoa.
Right?
When did this go?
All right. Here's the stems. There are little lenticels in there. Do you remember what the lenticels are for? Gas exchange. Yeah. What gas do they need? CO2? No.
C. Minus
9. Yeah, minus the C. They need what? Oxygen. For what process?
Cellular respiration.
Because who does cellular respiration?
All cells.
It's only taken 8 months. All right. Herbaceous and woody stems. I think it's pretty clear. All right. When you look at a cross section, let's say, of a tree, remember that when you look at the bulk part of that tree, if it's cut in half, you're looking at xylem. Because the vascular cambium can only make xylem to the inside and phloem to the outside. So it keeps making more wood. To the outside, it keeps making more phloem. And there's also cork cambium to help make the hard parts of the bark. The old part of the tree is called the heartwood. It is probably clogged with resins and not even helpful anymore. It's the newer sapwood that is really viable. And then here you can see the vascular cambium that's making more xylem and more phloem. All right, modifications of stems. They can be used for storage. They can be horizontal stems. They can have stems that climb, and so can leaves, and do that. Let's look at those leaves. Oh, let's look at some more leaves. What's this one here? Eudicot, and this is a monocot. Straight up, straight out. The veins grow the same way that the whole plant grows. Straight up, like grass, like a palm tree, because a palm tree is a monocot, right? Straight up. Straight up now, tell me. Okay, here you can see. Okay, here we can see. Look, he's like, what is this? You. Okay, so then you're like, never mind. Okay. Hey, cross section of a leaf. Palisade mesophyll are on the edges. Spongy mesophyll.
It's Friday.
Jeannie walked away. Jeannie just said. Leaf modifications, cactus, Venus flytrap. Yay! Okay. Questions. Here we go. Yes, you have. I've been in here since 6:30 this morning.
Oh, you're doing well.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
We get all these
Zone of maturation. Let's think this through.
I got all of them.
Okay, listen for a minute. If it was at the zone of cell division, it's just still making new cells. Zone of elongation, as it elongates, it would rip it off. It would rip off the root hairs. So when it's maturing, that's when you have the root hairs. Okay, cortex is found in roots and stems. Let me tell you where it is. Okay, the cortex would be more towards the center of the stems of vascular bundles. It would be at the monocot roots in the center. Whereas when you look at Eudicot roots, you have the star, and then you have the endodermis, and then outside of that, you have the cortex. Does that make sense? Okay. Next, which level of leaf carries on the most photosynthesis? Mesophyll. Epidermis, good, nobody picked that. C. Epidermal layer, no. That is more of a protective layer with a waxy cuticle to protect it so that it doesn't have water loss. And what else do people say? Both A and B. No, wrong. No. Whoa, only 2 people got it. Protoderm gives rise to the epidermal tissue. Procambium gives rise to xylem and phloem. Ground meristem gives rise to parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. And there is no epiderm meristem. Or periderm. Number 5, secondary thickening of stems occurs in many eudicots. They get, think about this, monocots generally, it's like grass, annuals, they last 1 year. But eudicots are when you have that secondary thickening of walls. And that, my friends, that is the end. Yay! Yay! Have a piece of toast. Hey, at this point, you should already have planted your plants. If this is Monday night, right?
Oh, why are we setting this Monday night?
What? Of course you should be preparing your head. This is just for the people that forgot till Monday night to listen to the prep, right? Yeah, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, right? And your lab map should be ready to go on Tuesday, right? Okay, you're super smart. Have a piece of toast. Love you very much. Tell them goodbye.
Goodbye.